labeled for minor species. So if you give a lamb or a goat a shot of Baytril, that's a violation of law. The fluoroquinolone group of antibiotics is prohibited by law to be used extra label. You got to know these things, because if you pop a residue with that, there is strict and severe enforcement of that particular law. And includes jail time. So you got to be aware of what you're using. And this has to be in place. This valid veterinary client-patient relationship is now a legal definition that is being, any lawyers in here? It's being exploited. So be aware of that. So that means that you cannot pick up the phone and just call a veterinarian and say, hey, you know, I got this sick calf, I need a shot of antibiotic, can I send my wife by and have her pick it up? Unless they know you and have been on your place, they cannot dispense that medication. And the penalty for violating a veterinary client-patient relationship is possible loss of our license. So if I don't know you, am I going to send it out? No, because I'm not jeopardizing my license. So here's the definition of a valid veterinary client-patient relationship. The veterinarian assumes responsibility for making medical judgments and the need for treatment, and the client agrees to follow instructions. My instructions always start with filet mignon first. Just be aware. You got to have some of that first. There's sufficient knowledge of the animals by the veterinarian to initiate at least a general or preliminary diagnosis. This is the legal deal. This is the key. The vet has seen and is personally acquainted with the keeping and care of the animals. So if I've never been on your place, I cannot make the diagnosis over the phone. I have to see the individual animal. I have to establish that relationship first. Okay? And here's another important part. I got to be readily available for follow-up in case of an adverse reaction. This is the legal definition, and so what is happening now in civil court is to show a violation of this. If a residue occurs, they get after both the person and the veterinarian now. Okay? All this information is on those labels. You got to read it. There's a lot of things on those labels that you don't realize. From a safety standpoint, there are medications, which we're going to talk a little bit about in the next segment, that can hurt you. How many of you ever used Mycotil? You ever heard of Mycotil? You ever used it? What happens if you accidental injection? You die, right? That's the deal. You die. I never did send it out in my clinic. In fact, I just never used it because I was always afraid if I did, something like that would happen, and I just didn't want that liability. So I just never used the drug. It's a great drug. But boy, there's a high amount of training that has to go along with it because you die. That's serious. Dosage, does it matter? Certainly. You have to follow the label. Do we sometimes give more? Sometimes. But we got to have a reason for doing that. We just don't say, I have some goods a lot's better. That doesn't work. Timing. You know, if it says 2 doses 48 hours apart and you give the first one and they get better, you still give the second. Because one of the things with antimicrobial resistance that we're concerned about is exposing the bacteria to a sublethal dose. Does that influence antimicrobial resistance? Well, science is still unsure about that. But the point of the matter is that we should be careful how we dose things and make sure that we are adequately dosing, especially when we use antimicrobials. We have to be extremely careful with how we use those things. Route, does route matter? What do you think is faster absorbed, in the muscle or under the skin? What do you think? In the muscle, why? More blood flow. There's more blood in muscle, right, than there is under the skin? So, how many of you drag calves? Okay, when you're dragging calves, where does blackleg go? Good for you. Not here, right? That's where we always used to put it because you got somebody on that neck that's got that front leg lifted. If you put it in the armpit, when you're butchering and you're skinning that back, you can take that whole front leg off without spilling a drop of blood if you're really careful, right? There's one big set of vessels right there. But what's in the armpit? It's that real lacy, loose connective tissue, right? So if we put vaccine in there, how consistently is it going to be absorbed? Heck, there's almost no blood there. We can't. So here's another soapbox moment. I have a lot of those. From a soapbox standpoint, there's two things that we do. When we put an antigen into an animal, we're vaccinating them, right? That's what this is used for. We put it in there, we squeeze the trigger, we just vaccinated that animal. The question is, did we immunize it? Did what we do cause a response? And our goal should never be to vaccinate, but to immunize. We want an action by that body as a result of what we just did, right? That's our goal, is to immunize. You know, and if we run a set of calves through and we do everything right, do you have any idea how many are immunized that day? The answer is roughly 75%. So if you do everything correctly and life is good and conditions are outstanding, maybe 3/4 of them will respond to what we just did. That's why booster vaccinations and priming that immune system is so important. Developing memory in that animal is so important because we never get them all. And so it's really important that we do the things that matter to increase our chances of immunizing as opposed to just vaccinating. Okay? That route of administration matters because sometimes, like for instance, I'll take Ivomec. You ever given Ivomec in the muscle? For one thing, it creates a pretty good lesion. Burns like crazy. Yeah, you know how it is after you give a shot of Ivomec, it hurts them for a while. It creates a pretty good lesion in the muscle. But Ivomec, if you give it in the muscle, doesn't work nearly as well because it's absorbed too quickly. And so it doesn't have the prolonged duration of action that's required, especially to kill external parasites. So you can give them a shot of Ivomec, but if you got most of it in the muscle, you're not going to kill the lice and ticks on them, and then you're mad because the stuff didn't work. If we give it sub-Q, there's a product in there, one of the stabilizing agents is designed to make sure that it's absorbed very slowly, so you get the duration of efficacy for it. So that matters. If something is supposed to be given in the muscle, the reverse is true. If it's IM only, it relies on a certain absorption rate to reach its peak blood level. And if it's absorbed too slowly, it never gets there. So the route really does make a difference. You have to be careful. Read the label and observe the withdrawal times. What is a withdrawal time? Well, it's the time from the last dose of medication till that animal can legally be sold for consumption, for human consumption. There's difference between milk withdrawal and meat withdrawal. It depends on the products, but anything put into a food animal will have a withdrawal associated with it. So if there are drug residues present in the tissue, does that mean it's bad? The answer is no. There are levels and a tolerance level that has been determined for almost all of the pharmaceuticals. That's part of the approval process. They go through and they look at tissue residues for a period of time, and FDA decides, okay, if it's below this, it's acceptable for human consumption. That may not be zero, but it's tolerable. Here's a letter, and this is an actual letter. This happened in 2017, June 6, 8, and 9. The Food and Drug Administration conducted an investigation of your beef cow-calf operation located blah, blah, blah. The list letter notifies you of the violation of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that we found during an investigation of your operation. We found that you offered for sale an animal for slaughter as food that was adulterated. That word right there tells you, are they your friends now? Not so much. This is not going to be a friendly affair. Specifically, our investigation revealed that on or about March 1st, 2017, you delivered a cow identified with back tag and Bengal tag that gave for slaughter as food. On or about March 17, more information, slaughtered this animal. They found analysis of tissue samples collected from this animal identified the presence of 10.2 parts per million of flunixin. Flunixin is banamine. So they found banamine in the liver. FDA has established a tolerance of 0.125 parts per million. What do we had? 10, right? 100 times the legal limit, right? 100 times what's tolerable. So here's the levels. Tetracycline, what is that? That's an antibiotic, right? The level that they found was 23 parts per million. The tolerance is 12. They found that in the kidney. This is a cephalosporin antibiotic. The level was found was 10.3. Tolerance is 0.4. Found that in the kidney. So I got to tell you, let me see, I think it's on the next page. Our investigation also found that you hold animals under conditions that are so inadequate that medicated animals bearing potential harm from drug residues are likely to enter the food supply. They are not your friend. So anyway, you don't want one of these letters. This particular database is public. So you can go on to the website and look up any tissue residue violation, anybody can, and your name will be listed if you ever popped a residue. You don't want that in the public space. So remember, route matter, all these things matter. There's other ways you can give medications that we don't talk about. Intrauterine, intramammary, intraruminal, intraperitoneal. I got to ask that question. That's in the abdominal cavity. You put it in the cavity. That is a place we used to use quite a bit. The point of this is that from a BQA standpoint, we want to use these others. We don't want to use this. So when do we give a shot in the muscle? Only if the label instructs us to do so. And there are certain medications that are required that you give them in the muscle. That's when we put it in the muscle. Otherwise, we try to use any other route that we can. Always avoid IM, because if we never put a needle in the muscle, we never have a blemish that results in trim, right? That's our goal. If you have a choice, always choose sub-Q. So to give us proper or a more correct sub-Q, you increase your chances of giving a proper sub-Q injection if you tint the skin. So you pull the skin up a little bit and go right behind it. By elevating that skin off of there, it gives you a better opportunity to not pick up muscle. Obviously, your facilities have to allow for that. There's places I ain't putting my fingers in there. I mean, I like my fingers. I want to keep them. So there's certain outfits I can't do that with because their facilities won't allow for it. And that's okay. You do the best you can. But the point is in situations like that, you strive to do it correctly. Everything. You know, we cannot do what's convenient for us.